Hello, everyone. Thank you for being with us. First, I'd like to introduce Chief Sam Taylor from as you know, the Lakeland Police Department. We gave you a briefing last night, and you will find that the information that we provide for you today is remarkably close to the initial information that we released. Of course, any information we release this early after an investigation of this magnitude is subject to modification because our detectives are still actively working this event. But before we start, let me show you some brief clips of first clip will be the initial find where the officer heard shots fired, saw them as one of them was running back into the car. Then there was a short pursuit. Then you'll see the second clip, short clip, where the officer was chasing the suspect, and the suspect ran around the corner, turned around, and shot at the police officer. And we will show you not only a couple of seconds of that, but we'll also show you a freeze frame so that you actually can see how the guy was not only not shooting back over toward the officer, but actually turned and squared off in order to shoot at him. Okay, this was the initial shooting that he heard, and as you see, our suspect, even though he was commanded to stop, he jumped in the car and off they fled. This was from the initial shooting. And this was called in as a dangerous shooting. And the pursuit, now our suspect with a firearm to the left, and you can see the firearm in his hand. The car is left on its own to wander down the street and sideswipe some innocent person that's just trying to get home from work. And the next clip, now the officer is pursuing our suspect with the gun, Dalmas. And you see the dirt fly up. That's when the officer is shot right there. That's when our officer shot. There's the freeze frame to show how he turned all the way around 180 degrees in order to shoot at the officer. And that shot is what hit the officer in the foot. So I first wanted you to see that. Now, as everyone knows, we're doing Facebook Live, and that's important. And the reason it's important today is because the news stations and the television are going to blur out the faces of these folks that are under 18 years of age because they don't want to hurt the little darlings who are, by the way, shooting at the cops, shooting at the neighbors, stealing stuff. So they've got this silly policy where they won't run this stuff. So for all of you who watch the edited news, go back to our Facebook and see the real news, okay? I am not happy with that if you can't tell. I read the morning paper after a guy tries to kill a police officer and they fuzz out his face because he's only 13 years old with a gun shooting at the cops after he shoots at somebody in the neighborhood. So here you go, get ready, editors at your television stations, for editing this stuff out. And I'll probably mention it again that I'm not happy with your editorial decision. Shame on you. You're hiding criminals who are shooting at neighbors, who are shooting in neighborhoods, who are shooting at innocent people because you don't want to show their face, and they're felons. They're dangerous felons. So here's what they were doing, so I can give a little color behind your edit. They were riding around in Julian's vehicle. Julian is 19, Wesley, that shot the police officer, is 13, and Leonard is 14. Now, when we talked to you last night, Wesley was in custody. We had just arrested, the police had arrested Julian in the vicinity of the scene where he ran. Leonard ran and got all the way home to West Lakeland before we arrested him later in the evening. He was 14. Now, here's a test for those of you who would wonder, okay, if there's 3 people in the car, how many guns are there? Well, we found 2. So who had the guns? The 13-year-old that shot the police officer, the 14-year-old Leonard Spate had one underneath the seat. And here's what we know. The details we didn't release. So Officer Smith is on another call. And he's on this other call, and out comes a dangerous shooting in the 1600 block of Kettles near the Simpson Park. So he hears the gunshots, and he rushes up, and you saw the video clip, where Dalmas is now getting into the left rear seat of the car. And the car speeds off. There's a short pursuit. They all 3 abandon the car to run from the cops. Leonard leaves his gun underneath the right front passenger seat where he's riding. Wesley Dalmas takes his gun with him and ultimately shoots the police officer. And Jermaine Julian, who's driving his mama's car, leaves it to ride off by itself, sideswiping some poor innocent person probably trying to come home from work. So the shooting occurs. And it's much like the chief gave you the rendition last night. Our follow-up is that Wesley Dalmas intentionally tried to murder a Lakeland police officer. But that was only after they were out cruising. You know what they were doing? They were smoking marijuana. You know, that low-level, nonviolent drug. Let me say that again, because you see, that causes the media to cringe every time I say it. They were all riding around smoking that low-level, nonviolent drug that they call it, marijuana. Well, why were they doing that? Because they were looking for an op. You know what an op is? Opposition. You see, here's what we know. We know that Wesley is an associate gang member. See, he's associates of gang members. Jermaine has been determined to be a gang member at 19. Leonard, at only 14, is determined to be a gang member. So they're smoking dope, riding in the car, looking for an op. What's an op? An opportunity to shoot the opposition. And obviously, they found them because they shot in the direction of someone. Did that someone report to the police? We have no idea who they were shooting at, whose vehicle, whose house, what person they were shooting at, because no one reported it to us. But alas, they won't report it because they normally don't, because their thought is, I know who the opposing gang member is, and I'll go back and shoot at them later. Well, newsflash, you won't get a chance to shoot at these folks because we got them locked up. So now we know that, as the chief reported, the shooting, he turned and shot. He fled on foot again from the police officer. Subsequent to that, he ran around the corner of the next building and hid behind a bush. And Wesley then, when the police officer, Officer Smith, noticed that nobody's here, he looked back, and behind him, he sees Wesley, still firearm in hand, jumps up and tries to get away again, and that's when there's another engagement and Wesley's shot. We know this morning that Wesley is shot in the leg and he shot in the left thigh and the stomach. We know that he was carrying a Taurus 9mm semi-automatic. We know that when he spun to shoot at at Officer Smith, at the Lakeland police officer, he shot at him 3 times. We also know that the other firearm was a Taurus 9mm as well. But you know what's interesting about this? Now I'm going to make another group of people not happy, but you should understand that when you leave your firearms in your vehicles at night, this is the thieves that are stealing them. That's right. That's how they got these guns. So far, we've not been able to find where these 2 Tauruses were stolen from. They're not in the computers, which means somebody's not keeping their serial numbers. Do you know that all 3 of these people were on active probation? All 3 of them. What were they on probation for? Well, Leonard was with Wesley the night that they broke into or attempted to break into a car, and it turns out we told you the victim saw them breaking into the car. It was a neighbor, and sheriff's deputies arrested them. We also reported last night that the gun that they stole in that conveyance burglary. Nay, nay. We've since learned that Wesley brought that gun with him to flip handles and break into the car. So I want you to think about this, ladies and gentlemen. The person breaking into your car, seeking your wallet, your cards, your cash, your guns, this guy, even though his chronological age is 13, he's a hardened criminal who will shoot you, because if you'll shoot the cops, you'll shoot anybody. And he was that night arrested with Leonard, who was 14. One of the conditions of both of their probations, among many conditions, was they're not supposed to be together. Let me think. Were they together yesterday? Yes. Jermaine has a more illustrious criminal history, and that he's been arrested for attempted burglary and loitering and prowling and violations of probation. They've all had violations of probation because they don't pay attention. He's had 6 arrests in the past, 4 VOP felonies and 2 straight-up felony criminal charges, and these others were arrested that night, and several violations since then. Listen, folks, so let me encapsulate this. They're burglars. They go out at night. They break into cars, open car doors, and take guns. So when you leave your gun in the car, they're stealing it and then shooting up neighborhoods, shooting up other gang members, and shooting police officers with your gun because you're not responsible in how you care for that gun. And I'll give you one little piece of news. They'll also shoot you with your gun that they take out of the car if they get a chance. So these are bad guys. They're bad guys. I don't care that chronologically they're 14 and 13 and 19. These are who's murdering each other in the street. They tried to shoot someone last night. The police standing in the gap got shot, keeping the community and the neighborhood safe. So when you want to protect these people, when they ought to be held accountable, you're giving them the ammunition. You're enabling them to continue on with their criminal conduct and not be held appropriately accountable. The community deserves better, and it needs to start with the media. Okay? Chief.
Thank you, Sheriff. Good morning, everyone. I want to give you a brief update on the officer's condition. We touched base with him this morning. Obviously, we've been sitting with him all night long. He had a pretty good night. As you can tell, as you can imagine, rather, he is in sleep as well as you can sleep in a hospital with a hole in your foot. He was shot in the left foot, as I mentioned to you last night, one time. The sheriff showed you the body cam video where that occurred. I also want to talk about the fact that, and I didn't do a very good job last night, I don't think, telling you about the courageousness and the heroic actions that the officer took last night. I was more focused on giving you the facts, but I can't be more complimentary of the way the officer reacted last night. He reacted exactly as he was trained, just as we know that the sheriff's office would react, the deputies would react the same way. Lakeland police officer, and particularly Officer Smith, reacted that way last night. He had an opportunity after he was shot to pull back and set up a perimeter and just let the guy go into the apartment complex. He chose not to do that. He continued to press the issue, and got Dalmas to lay up into the bushes, where he was ultimately able to flush him out and get him in custody after another gun battle. So what Officer Smith did last night was nothing short of heroic, and I'm very proud that he performed the way that we knew that he would when we hired him. So, but his condition is good. We anticipate that he will probably be released sometime today. He's going through a round of antibiotics, and once that is done and the doctors are satisfied with his condition, he'll be released. He does have 2 broken bones in his foot as a result of the gunshot, and he needs a new pair of boots. So I'll probably buy him a new pair of boots. Well, I will buy him a new pair of boots. The suspect, Dalmas, is still at Tampa General Hospital. He's being treated for his injuries. He will be admitted. They've done obviously some evaluations, some tests on him. He's certainly being guarded by a Lakeland police officer right now, and we're sending officers over there to keep a watch on him. But he is a dangerous person. He is a dangerous young man, and even though he's 13, he committed an adult crime, and I agree with the sheriff. He needs to be held accountable to exactly for the crime that he committed. You can't be 13 and continue to get away with crimes like this, and I agree wholeheartedly with the sheriff. I do want to show you one photograph, which I think is instructive. This is shortly after they bailed out of the car and were running down the sidewalk. This is from the in-car camera of Officer Smith. It is a still photograph. He ran down the sidewalk, running east on the sidewalk, at which point Officer Smith tried to cut him off with his car. He turned around and ran back to the west. He's fortunate, and by he I mean Officer Smith is fortunate, that Dalmas decided not to just wheel around and shoot Officer Smith in the head, because Officer Smith had a lot going on at the time. He's trying to give instructions on the radio. He's trying to navigate his police car. He has a lot of things going on in the cockpit of that car, and he would have a difficult time getting his weapon out and defending himself. Fortunately, Dalmas decided to run. Instead of not engage him, he decided to engage him later. But this is a still photograph. For those that didn't see the video clearly, you can clearly see the handgun in his right hand that he's running with. And that's a still photograph off the in-car camera. So, all right. I also have some updates on some another call that happened in Lakeland this morning. I'll do that after the sheriff and I take questions. So if you have any questions, we'll be happy to stand for questions. So.
When Officer Smith was already in the neighborhood, did he receive a call that there was a shooting in progress, or did he just hear the shooting and decided to pursue?
Both. He was in the neighborhood dealing with another issue unrelated to the shooting. He heard the shots and then heard the call go out over the radio and started immediately heading into that area. It was not at Simpson Park. Some of the reports I read last night that you guys reported that the shooting occurred at Simpson Park. That is not correct. It did not occur at Simpson Park. It was actually probably about 2 or 3 blocks west of Simpson Park. Okay.
Now, are these gang members or just gang affiliated? Like, what's the difference?
Well, they're gang affiliated. They're not certified. There's a process they have to go through to be certified as a gang member. These guys just are not old enough probably to have gone through that process and the paperwork, but they're well on their way to be fully associated or fully identified gang members. They're just not there yet. At least 2 of them. No.
Is it possible these actions were trying to get that certification? I mean, is this kind of is that how this
Yeah, I don't know what right now we don't have that information, so certainly that would be in their mind, a check mark on their resume that they would probably present for certification, yes. Certainly a possibility.
And can you clarify, obviously, at this point, Officer Smith does not know, obviously, the age of the child, correct, or the team that's shooting at him?
He doesn't know, doesn't matter really. He doesn't know the age and he doesn't know their aim, he doesn't know anything about them. Look, Officer Smith just came to work yesterday like all the Lakeland officers do, like all of the Lakeland police officers do, and officers all over the state and deputies all over the state. He had no idea this was going to turn out the way it turned out. He had no idea that this individual that he was chasing, now he had a pretty good idea that the guy was violent because he could see the handgun, but he didn't have any idea the guy was going to wheel around on him and take a shot. Thank God he prepared just for that event in case it did happen, and he was able to address it the way he was trained to address it. But no, he had no idea.
And you recovered the gun?
We did.
Okay, and do you know how many shots were left in the gun? Were there any shots left in the gun? Any?
I'll leave that up to the sheriff and the investigators to talk about later if they want. So yes, we do probably have a pretty good idea, but they're still trying to firm that up just to make sure.
How old is Officer Smith? And was he one of the ones that were recruited from New York?
He did come from New York. He's one of the NYPD officers we recruited from New York. And I would get you the age. If I had to guess, based on my conversation with him last night, I would say late 20s, early 30s. Although he may be 50, just a young-looking, fellow. So, but anything else?
Did you recover additional ammo as well? In the car?
Yeah, I'm not aware of any additional ammo that we recovered. So,
We did recover spent casings from the right front where Leonard Spate was sitting. So it appeared that part of the shots that were fired then or some other time, he was sitting in the right front seat because the casings were all around where he was sitting. And keep in mind, we're still in the initial stages of the investigations. All of those questions will be answered later on. But what should be astounding to all of you, had these violent, dangerous criminals that were under the age of 18 been taken serious on the front end, then this event may not have happened last night. But when it's just like any other person, when you allow them to get away with it and allow them to get away with it, and they are in trouble for a felony, and you give them the gift of probation, and they don't follow the probation, and they don't follow the probation, and they're not disciplined, there's not a line, then they keep doing what they want to do. And yesterday afternoon, they were looking for somebody to kill. Did you hear what I said? And the police officer heard the shots and ran there to protect the community and ultimately got shot himself. But I am sick to my stomach of them going, oh, did you know his age? It doesn't make any difference. If you're old enough to hold a gun and point it at a cop and pull the trigger, you're old enough to be shot or to go to jail. Just saying.
Were they dealing drugs?
Not at that moment. We don't have any drug charges. They were just smoking drugs and looking for somebody to shoot at 5:30 in the afternoon. Think about it. If you want to talk about chronological age, do you know any children that go, hey, let's get out of school today, get our guns, smoke a little dope, and shoot up some people? These are hardened criminals, and don't be misled by those that want to tell you anything else. And had the people who wanted to coddle them and hug a thug cared enough to give them the services that they needed to get their attention, we wouldn't have been here where they were looking for somebody to kill and then shot and tried to kill a police officer. The only reason Officer Smith's alive right now is he was a bad shot, because he ran around the corner, bladed back around, and ambushed the officer as the officer was pursuing him to take him into custody and to protect the rest of the community from another shooting episode by this guy.
Can you explain why he was expelled from school?
I don't have any information about school records, and if I did, most of that is protected by law, so I couldn't respond to that if I knew.
We confirmed that one of the three individuals lived in West Lakeland.
And where?
One of the three lived in West Lakeland. I'm assuming the other two also reside in Lakeland?
Yes. Actually, I've got all of their addresses here. One of them lived on Kansas. One of them lived in, let me see, West 720 Emma Street. Jermaine Julian, the 19-year-old, lived at 720 Emma Street. Leonard Spate lived at 2581 Chestnut Woods Drive. And Wesley lived at 604 Kansas.
This may be a comment more than a question, but I think the reason why the age is important is that we're all horrified. So I think of a 13-year-old kid in middle school getting detention, and really bad, you get suspension. Now they're out trying to kill cops. It's just pretty overwhelming.
And they're trying to kill cops who are trying to stop them from killing people in the neighborhood. So that should be the story. We got a 13 and a 14-year-old with a gun trying to shoot people up in the neighborhood, driven by a 19-year-old with a long history, and they've all been caught breaking into cars or attempting to break into cars.
Is this related to the Iowa Street shooting? Are they related to that gang?
There's no indication of that, no. No.
Do we know what gang they're affiliated with?
We do, but we're not gonna talk about it.
We don't market for gangs.
Right. All right. Yeah. All right, this morning, I wanted to brief you guys on another incident that we had at the Lakeland Police Department. This morning, officers responded to the 3600 block of South Florida Avenue. Just Move is the name of the business, dumpster behind the business there. A gentleman who was going through the dumpster had located a bag. Inside the bag was a fetus that was deceased, a male baby. Still had the placenta attached, and the umbilical cord was deceased. Obviously called 911. Officers responded along with fire rescue, but the baby obviously did not make it and was deceased at the scene. So the medical examiner now is in possession of the child and will conduct their post-mortem examination. And detectives for the police department are out there canvassing the area, trying to find any information they can that will lead them to who put the child in the dumpster.
What would be the charge?
There would be several charges depending on what the medical examiner determines, whether the child was killed, was the child stillborn. You could have a homicide charge. You know, the child suffocated in the bag. We're kind of waiting on the results of the autopsy. So,
Kind of a morbid question. Do you have any idea how long it had been in the dumpster?
probably less than 10 hours.
Do you want to explain what safe places are for?
I do, yeah. Safe places are any police department, fire station. Thanks for the question. That was on my notes to talk about at the very end. Anybody that is pregnant and feels like they can't take care of the child and wants to drop the child off at a fire station, police department, I think hospital, emergency rooms can take them in, no questions asked. And the sad thing about it is, right across the street or just down the street, there's a Advent, I believe, or there's a emergency room. It's not Advent. There's an emergency room, and just down the street a little bit further is an ambulance station that the mother could have taken, or the father, whoever it was that dumped the child. I'm not making any assumptions. Could have taken the child too.
Is it up to a year old where they can take the child?
I'll have to get you the information on that. I didn't research it that closely. Yes, ma'am.
I was going to ask on the morbid question topic, do you know if it was a full-term baby?
I don't know that, but the indications that I have is it was a viable, it wasn't a non-viable fetus. I would actually refer to it as a baby.
You have any nationality of the baby?
I do, but I prefer not to say it, to be honest with you. It was a male. That's all I want to go into. All right. We'll get you some more information on that as we as we get it, and if we make an arrest on it or once we identify where the child came from, we'll let you know. So, all right? What else?
Chief.